Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
I am great. Welcome to the latest episode of The Wire. For those of you just joining, Nicole and I each week break down different real estate related wire fraud and cyber crime activity that's happening. We are certainly not in short supply of things to talk about today. And unfortunately, every day with these problems that continue to grow and permeate the real estate industry. So, Nicole, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, talking about real estate wire fraud again, of course.
No, shocking.
I know. But today, what we're going to talk about, there was a case that happened back in December of 2017. And I'm just going to kind of go through the timeline of what happened and we'll break down what went on and how things could have been prevented, of course. But in this case, the problem in this case is that the attorney's email was hacked. And, attorneys are usually pretty buttoned up, right? But we want to make sure that everyone understands, like, hey, no matter how buttoned up you think you are in the process, you still need to go through and make sure you're doing the basic things to protect yourself and your customer, no matter at what point you are in the transaction.
Can I just jump in and can I clear up a very common misconception that we get all the time,
Yeah.
which is thinking that attorneys are secured when it comes to these problems. And this is more of my personal opinion than a SafeWire opinion, but I will say personally, it's my belief that some of the most unsecured technologically, from a technology standpoint, people on the planet are attorneys. So while their job may be to mitigate and de-risk situations, they are in no way, shape, or form technologists by trade. And this idea that we kind of default to this idea that attorneys are safe when it comes to these transactions. Let's just blow that right apart right now, because that is oftentimes the opposite of what is true. Sorry, I just had to throw that PSA in there.
No, it's totally fair. Is it because they have disclosures that basically like take away all liability from them and they're better with words than we are? Or is it because they're not doing real estate transactions on a regular basis and they have other files they work on?
I mean, it's a combination of all of the above. And I think, generally speaking, the real estate title industry is saturated with attorneys. And, attorneys are not technologists by trade, and they're not often focused on technology and cyber fraud that comes by lack of technology or lack of systems in place to protect people. So it's a combination of all of the above, and they're really lucrative targets, right? And so they're targets for this problem. They're often not incredibly well protected from a technology standpoint, and we have this kind of faux trust in them and how they do things that they're going to keep us safe. And maybe they can help mitigate things like lawsuits and litigation, but they're no safer in any way, shape, or form than most of the companies out there, if not all the companies out there.
I think that's fair. Well, let's dig in here.
You want to know what I really think?
No. We'll stop you. Okay, say it.
I don't. Attorneys get paid to sue people, so I'm just going to stop.
All right, so we're going to go back to December of 2017 and cut you off. This family, Rich Hopen and his wife, were empty nesters. They were getting ready to move and downsize. They received all of their proceeds like in mid-December of 2017. And then on January 4th in 2018, he received an alert that his bank, PNC, had paid his mortgage payment to Wells Fargo. Well, this Wells Fargo mortgage was tied to the home he sold 3 weeks prior. So there really should have been no mortgage payment made. So this raised red flags. It perplexed him. He called Wells Fargo and said, hey, what's going on here? I sold my home. And they said, hey, we have no record of you selling your home. So then he called his attorney, and his attorney said, oh, I hope it's not wire fraud. And at that point, it's like, hey, if you think that it could be wire fraud, why didn't you stop it ahead of time? We have ways to prevent this. So Wells Fargo back and said, hey, I want you to return the payment to me. I'm not going to be making any more payments on this. This is a mistake. Something's going on. Please don't report it to the credit agencies. We need to figure this out. So at that point, they had to like start looking into this to see what was going on. And basically what happened, the way this happened is the attorney had the client, Rich Hopen in New Jersey, call and order his own payoff from Wells Fargo. And then when he got his payoff, he forwarded it to his attorney, who then forwarded it to the title company. Now, the attorney's email ended up being the one that was hacked. And so when the email crossed through the attorney's email platform, basically what happened is the hacker took the payoff with the wiring instructions, swapped out just the account number, and then forwarded it over to the title company. So everything else looked the same. The name, the amount, everything else was consistent except for the account number. So then they sent it to the title company, and then the title company wired the payoff amount to the hacker instead of the account for the mortgage.
I mean, there's so many aspects of that are just FUBAR, right? FUBAR stands for. But this is the kind of stuff that we see all the time, specifically with real estate agents. And the fact that an attorney is putting themselves in the middle of a transaction dealing with financial payoffs that really are not things they should be dealing with. We invite in more places for potential compromise and infiltration, the more people we're sharing unsecured information with. And oftentimes that's happening through real estate agents. In this case, it's happening to an attorney. The reality is these fraudsters don't care who it's happening through, as they're just effective working through attorneys as they are through real estate agents. And at the end of the day, if consumers are sharing that information with an unprotected third party, in this case, an attorney, we open ourselves up for this type of fraud.
And it's important. Like the reason we're talking about this one today is because we usually do talk about title companies or escrow agents, but attorneys are also handling closings in many states. And so it's equivalent to a title company or an escrow agent. As we've talked about before, transactions are handled differently all across the country. No real standard on how transactions happen. And so because we have all these different entities working to do closings, we have to make sure that we call it out. We have to make sure we say, like, watch out for this one, watch out for this one, watch out for this one.
Yeah, and there's just a misconception that attorneys are safer than the rest of us. And the reality is it's just not true. The attorneys are as big of a target as anyone. Real estate agents are as big of a target as anyone. Title companies are as big as a target as anyone. And everyone's a target. And so if everyone's a target, we're only as safe as our protections that we have in place to keep our process and procedures to keep people safe. And so if those aren't secured and there aren't tools in place to keep consumers and transactions safe, then no one's safer than anyone else.
Right. So at the end of this, the title company had sent $239,000 off to a hacker. So the next step is that this client is trying to figure out how to get his money back because he has a new home he wants to get to downsize into. He's an empty nester. He's not starting from scratch. And that's not where you don't want to start from scratch with savings and buying a new house and trying to pay that down again. That's extremely stressful. So at that point, he goes through 16 months. He went through this process for 16 months dealing with the title company and Wells Fargo and the underwriter trying to resolve this whole problem. And finally it did get resolved, and they took care of paying it off. But the question that comes to mind, so there's a few parts of the process. Obviously the attorney should not be forwarding the email with wiring instructions. We know that right off the bat. That should just go from the person who's handling the wire to the client, and that's it. It should just be a direct communication. The more the more layers you go through, the higher the chance for risk.
Secure direct communication where the person who's sending you the information is actually that person.
Exactly. But my other question is, so on this payoff, he said that the name and all the other information was the same. It was just the account number. So when Wells Fargo received it with the account number, do they verify when they're applying payoff? Like when they receive a wire for a payoff, do they verify the account number and the names on the account just to double check it? I mean, I have no idea. I'd be interested in talking to someone in the payoff department to figure out how that process works.
Well, there's something going on that a lot of these cases oftentimes involve Wells Fargo. So generally, there's a reason for that sort of thing, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And Wells Fargo certainly isn't doing anything intentional, but it certainly feels and seems like, from the amount of cases we see that involve Wells Fargo, that they aren't doing a whole hell of a lot to prevent this from happening either. So, I don't know, but whatever they're doing isn't enough, because too many of these cases involve Wells Fargo.
I'm wondering if it's just easier for hackers to open up bank accounts with Wells Fargo, and that could be part of the process.
I think that's a big part of it. I think that's what we've seen over the course of the last few years is these guys go to the path of least resistance. And so if one bank has more lax rules to know, they all are supposedly abiding by these KYC or know your customer rules. But if one place is abiding stronger than another, then, that's where they go. They go to the path of least resistance. So there's some reason that there's so much commonality around why these transactions involve Wells Fargo. And I think that that's a topic for a deeper dive in one of our future podcasts.
So what's a good way to prevent this?
We probably, though, Nicole, can't go and ask Wells Fargo for sponsorship to any of our future podcasts. I
would agree. I definitely was not on my list.
I don't think we're going to have any attorneys sponsoring us either.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, we're here to help them. We're not trying to make them look bad. We're trying to help them. I mean, at the end of the day, our podcast is going out to attorneys and title companies, and hopefully they can just take this for the value that it is and make some changes to their business so that they aren't one of the ones we're talking about.
Exactly.
I know I would. I'd say, oh my gosh, well, I got to button up my business. Okay. Anyway, so if we look at this, I mean, I'm just trying to think of like how it could have been prevented. So when the title company sent the funds over for payoff, is there any way to verify that Wells Fargo received it and is applying it to the account that it's supposed to go to? I mean, does the client have to follow through and say, okay, hey, my mortgage wasn't paid off? I mean, this guy didn't find out till 3 weeks later when his personal bank paid his next mortgage payment. I know I would have been really upset and thrown off by this. And if it took 16 months, which it did, I mean, that's too much. No one should be going through this. This is not what a consumer should be going through. I know people complain that turning on two-factor authentication is a lot of work. 16 months of litigation is a lot of work.
It's a nightmare. It's a good question. We talked about payoffs in the last podcast we did, or a week or two ago. And, fortunately that process is fairly broken right now. And there's not a strong way that the receiver of those payoffs is able to communicate back that information is being applied to the right place. And that's one of the reasons why we're dealing now with so much payoff fraud that's happening. So, we have a bit of a broken process and system that has been working the same way for the last 20 plus years. And now all of a sudden in the last 5 years, the world has changed. And this specific part of the process is now being targeted more than ever before.
Yeah, this one throws me off. There's so many questions about the process that are broken that I don't have answers to. And
to get back to your question, when you ask, well, what could have been done? I mean, at the end of the day, the title company is still responsible on the information that they gather. And, I don't know what happened in this particular case, who paid what, but if they're relying on a third party to receive information that should come directly and securely through the consumer, then that's a problem, right?
Right.
So, if again, we fall into this like trust that we're dealing with their attorney, and so they're impenetrable. Well, no, they're clearly not. So there's responsibility for the title company to know that they have good information coming to them. And if they're not collecting that securely, if they're relying on unsecured emails from anyone, an attorney and a real estate agent, whatever, then that's on them.
Yeah, again, it is crazy that they went through so many layers of communication to get those wiring instructions. When, like last week when we were talking to Kelly, she said, no, we get them directly from the title or from the lender. And it should be a direct communication just like that.
Yeah.
Should the title company have done that, this never would have happened.
Right. Now, 2017, 4 years ago, it's a little bit of a different world than it is today. So like, it's a bit more understandable than if that sort of thing was happening today, then, at this point, there really is just no excuse for it.
There really isn't. Everyone should know better at this point.
They should, and hopefully if they're listening to us, they are well educated on these types of problems that are happening and the do's and don'ts of what you should and shouldn't be doing, or go back and listen to our other podcasts that go into more detail around how to prevent this problem from the beginning.
We will help you.
What else we got, Nicole?
That's it. They ended up, everything was taken care of at the end of the day. Unfortunately, it took 16 months, but it's just really sad. You could tell this guy was really bummed throughout the whole process. It's an exciting moment to be an empty nester, I believe. I don't know. I'm not there yet. But it should be exciting, and you're moving on to the next phase of your life, and to have that rug pulled out from under you like that in such a catastrophic way is scary. It's the emotional damage that happens to these people. It's not just taking their money, just knowing that you took that from them is very extreme. It's extremely violating. It's scary.
It breaks you, and not just financially, but it breaks you emotionally and spiritually and mentally. It's really terrible. This video that we were referencing is actually available on stopwirefraud.org. It's a site that was developed by the American Land Title Association. So that is on there along with some additional information from Alta. So if anyone wants to reference in more detail what it is we were talking about today, that is where that exists.
Check it out.
Check it out. So if anybody has any more questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to either of us, Nicole at SafeWire.com and our website, SafeWire.com. We are here to be a resource for you and your business, and allow us to, or let us know if there's anything we can do to help those things.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Well, thanks so much, Nicole, and we will talk again next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.